Ali u svakom slučaju za kraj, ali ne manje bitno, dala bi reč gospođi Mariarosarii Guglielmi, predsjednici MEDEL-a, Udruženje sudija i tužioca evropskih, ali čiji smo naravno Udruženje tužilaca član, ali u posljednje vreme MEDEL deluje i mnogo šire, van okvira Evrope, svojim saopštenjima i svojim zainteresom. Iz tog razloga dala bi reč Mariarosarii.
Dear President, dear participants, good morning, and thank you very much for your kind invitation. It is really a great honor and pleasure to be here and to take the floor on behalf of MEDEL. The independence of prosecutors is a prerequisite for the rule of law and a necessary corollary to the independence of the judiciary. European and international charters, recommendations, and opinions have developed a set of shared principles that describe the role of a prosecutor as a promoter of justice who acts on behalf of society and in the public interest to respect and protect human rights, freedoms, all democratic values, such as the principle of equality before the law. And since its foundation, MEDEL has emphasized this role and always called for a parallel legal framework for judges and prosecutors, which must include self-governing bodies. We can say that the need for minimum standards of independence of prosecutors is now widely recognized, and I wish just to mention the opinion in 2023 of the Consultative Council of European Prosecutors that recommended the establishment of councils for prosecutors as self-governing body for securing the effective and impartial functioning of prosecution service and individual prosecutors through their independent decision-making. But despite principles, charters, recommendations, the position of the public prosecutor in the institutional arrangement of powers is constantly being called into question, to the extent that we can consider its status as one of systemic uncertainty. And in recent years, with the rise of populism, the public prosecutor, as the judiciary as a whole, has become the target of relentless efforts by rulers to limit its power and independence, efforts implemented through formal and informal strategies. Formal strategies mean legislative measures, constitutional amendments. Italy, my country, can serve as a striking example in this regard. The Constitution shaped prosecutors as members of the judiciary, thus removing them from the sphere of influence of the executive, and yet the constitutional reform sought by the government, which is in an advanced stage of approval, will disrupt fundamental aspects of this framework, paving the way for further changes aimed at establishing political control over prosecutors. It has been observed that from the viewpoint of governments, it may be even more attractive to undermine the independence of prosecutors rather than directly attacking the independence of courts. The former option is likely to generate less opposition and, as a result, be less costly for the government. MEDEL's experience has shown us that where and when the rule of law proves unstable, the institutional arrangement of public prosecutors can be strategically and aggressively exploited to modify institutional balances to the advantage of the executive power, providing it with a grip on the whole machinery of justice. And Poland is one of the most striking examples of such a process. The 2016 reform, by merging the roles of Minister of Justice and Prosecutor General, led to a concentration of power that eliminated all guarantees of internal independence, and increasing the power of this office over the courts deeply impacted on the separation of powers, providing the executive with a tool for exerting pressure on judges. The shared framework of European and international principles includes functional and individual independence. Prosecutors must be autonomous in their decision-making and able to make fundamental procedural decisions based on the law, evidence gathered, and personal convictions without undue interference from their superiors. And yet, even in this dimension, we can observe a gap between principles and experience, and formal and informal strategies aiming at strengthening the internal hierarchy of prosecutor's office without balancing increased prerogatives through accountability and transparency, which is essential to avoid external interference and undue or illegal pressures from within the prosecution system. There have been times and places in which the central protagonists of criminal justice have been judges. Today, the pivotal figures in criminal justice systems throughout the world appear more and more to be prosecutors. With these words, two scholars, Maximo Langer and David Slansky, described in a cross-national study on prosecutors and democracy the increasingly crucial role of prosecutors vis-à-vis the overall functioning of the justice system and the stability of the rule of law. But while prosecutors must deal with the responsibilities arising from this role, growing demands for protection of rights and freedoms, and complex challenges in the fight against high-level corruption, external pressures and undue interference are further exacerbated by the new global dimension of the attack on the rule of law and, in national context, by what is now a blatant institutional intolerance towards the function of the judiciary in implementing the rule of law. This is the new front of attacks against judicial independence, individual judges, and prosecutors. Prosecutors are the target, often the first and most vulnerable, of communication strategies, often led by high-profile politicians, and populistic rhetoric, producing a distorting mirror image of the judiciary and seriously undermining citizens' trust in its role. Judges and prosecutors are denied democratic legitimacy since they are not elected. They are accused of playing political role and of issuing decisions against the interests and the will of the people. So judges and prosecutors are the enemies of the people. And for this, often they and their families are in danger. Pressure on judges and prosecutors translates into attempts to restrict freedom of expression and association in the name of the impartiality and political neutrality of the judiciary. And the case law of the Strasbourg Court on Article 10 of the Convention in relation to magistrates clearly shows the extent of the attacks on these rights and the risk of the chilling effect that they can produce in context of democratic regression. All formal and informal strategies of attacks against judges and prosecutors by rulers can be considered a structural feature of the current global wave of autocratization, a process which, as noted in the Varieties of Democracy Institute 2025 report, necessarily requires, especially in the transition phase of the regime, that the rule of law be bent in favor of aspiring autocrats. So, faced with this complex situation, the resilience of independent prosecutors and the judiciary as a whole must be supported, first and foremost at institutional level. As emphasized in the 2025 Riga Declaration adopted by the European Network of the Council for the Judiciary, the role of councils is an essential one. Attacking judges and prosecutors for performing their function is a clear violation of the separation of powers. In order to build and maintain the resilience of magistrates, councils must openly share their position with the rest of the judiciary. Councils, says the declaration, must show leadership and courage. They must act without delay and use all means at their disposal that may include issuing legal opinions, speaking on behalf of the judiciary, seeking public support, protecting individual judges and prosecutors. The judiciary story, says the declaration, must be told effectively. To achieve this, the judiciary, also through the councils, should establish strong relationship with civil society, media outlets, and develop open communication channels to reach wider audiences. As Poland has taught us, the role of judicial associations is crucial as well in supporting judges and prosecutors, in upholding our collective commitment to defending rights and freedoms, in maintaining an open dialogue with civil society, and to strengthen solidarity among European judiciaries, their mutual ties, which today more than ever help us to face the difficult challenges for democracy and the rule of law. So today's conference will certainly represent a valuable opportunity to discuss all these challenges. And for this, I wish to thank once again our Association of Serbian Prosecutors on behalf of MEDEL for the invitation and the honor of participating in it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Hvala, Mariarosaria, na vašem govoru.